usually make a clumsy attempt at a joke to start these videos off, but after reflecting over this last week, I couldn't find the words. Between George Floyd's murder, the protests across the country, and the coronavirus disproportionately killing Black and brown Americans, the United States is in pretty rough shape. If you're asking what you can do, I've got 4 anti-racist book recommendations to share today. Let's check it out. Hi there, I'm Michelle with the Goffstown Public Library, where I'm an adult services librarian. My job is to bring the information you want or need to you when you want or need it. I am very happy to be back in the library today, but I'm not so happy about the circumstances that led me to discussing these anti-racist books in today's Book Talk with Michelle. I was on the fence about making these videos. I am a white woman with many other privileges. I work for a public library, and as a whole, libraries have a troubled history of paternalism and segregation. And to top it all off, I live in a very white state. There was a part of me that thought these current events were out of my purview. But in the end, I believe it would be a trademark of my personal and institutional white privilege to not discuss the country's troubles when Black people have no choice but to live them. I do have privilege, and that is why I have a responsibility to reflect about my place in the story of race in America. As part of that responsibility, today I speak to other white people about anti-Black racism. The time for ignorance, if that time ever existed, is over. While speaking about anti-racist books today, I expect to speak imperfectly. And I welcome good faith criticism in the comments so I can continue learning. I know inevitably I'll say the wrong thing, but that is no excuse to stay silent. If you are ready to engage with your whiteness as a force of privilege and oppression, I recommend beginning with Waking Up White by Debby Irving. Waking Up White is a memoir of the author's journey to discover herself in the story of race. As the daughter of privilege, Irving could never understand why she had trouble maintaining her multiracial friendships, or why her diversity efforts at work always seemed to fail. In her epiphany moment, she realizes whiteness has colored every aspect of her life. Like many white people, she didn't even know she had whiteness. As Irving unpacks her long-standing beliefs about colorblindness, being a good person, and wanting to help people of color, she reveals how each of these well-intended mindsets has actually perpetuated her ill-conceived notions about race. Each chapter offers reflection questions for the readers to examine their own experiences. Overall, Irving provides a possible roadmap for other white people as they begin their own journey in race. Many people have found Waking Up White to be a great starting point. The main criticism levied at Irving is that she doesn't do enough to separate her race and class privilege when discussing her old money New England upbringing. I don't hesitate to recommend this book. But based on my experience using it in book clubs, I have to say that you're most likely to identify with Irving's journey if you are aged 40 or older, if you are financially comfortable, and if you're politically center-left leaning. This is an important demographic to target because of the power those characteristics afford in American society. So if that sounds like you, you should definitely read Waking Up White. But if it doesn't quite sound like you, let me recommend White Fragility by Diangelo. This New York Times bestseller explores the counterproductive moves white people often make when the topic of race is brought up. Moves like feelings of guilt, anger, and fear, or behaviors like argumentation and silence. These moves serve to prevent any meaningful discussion about race and racism because they tacitly ask people of color to make white people feel better instead of engaging with the original issue. Diangelo is a white person talking to other white people. She is also an anti-racist educator who has seen these white fragility moves up close and personal. In her book, she offers an in-depth exploration of how white fragility connects to systematic oppression and ultimately perpetuates racial inequality. While Irving's book is the 101 class on whiteness, I'd say White Fragility is more like the 103 class. This is to say, you can still jump into this book at the beginning of your journey. Diangelo spends a good amount of time explaining basic concepts and defining key terms in an easy-to-understand way. In fact, I actually found White Fragility to be more to the point than Waking Up White. But it is also designed for white people who think other white people are the problem. This book is best for the white people who have engaged with race before, the white people who are probably university educated, who probably read The Atlantic, and who probably consider themselves woke. If you think you are not a racist, this is the book you should read. White Fragility will give you the opportunity to confront your biases and flaws while thickening your skin, metaphorically speaking, when talking about racism. Ultimately, it'll give you the groundwork on which you can build your understanding of racism in America with an open mind. It is not a comfortable read, I can say that from experience. But there is no way forward without getting over our discomfort when talking about race. And then when you are ready for a more advanced course on anti-racism, let me recommend White Supremacy and Me by Layla Saad. This title started off as a 28-day Instagram challenge, then morphed into a workbook, and finally into a published book. Saad presents a 28-day course to delve deep into how white supremacy acts through often well-meaning white people. The point of the project is to tell the truth about racist behaviors and feelings, both the big ones and the small ones. Each of the many prompts holds open space for white people to reject white supremacy and instead reclaim their humanity while simultaneously affirming the humanity of others. And all of the work you do in the book is towards the goal of becoming a good ancestor, someone who tried to make the world a better place for those who will come after us. These prompts go far beyond what's offered in Waking Up White. White Supremacy and Me demands truth and commitment from its readers. The writing is blunt, and there is no space for coddling. As such, I definitely recommend this book only after you've completed White Fragility. I can tell you that even if you've grappled with race before, this book promises an even deeper understanding through introspection. And last, I'd love to recommend A Colony in a Nation by Chris Hayes. While this book isn't explicitly about anti-racism, it did a lot for me in terms of understanding the criminal justice system and policing in America. If this last week has reminded the United States of anything, it's that white people and black people experience the police differently. Using historical, social, and political lenses, Hayes explains that our country has fractured in two: the colony and the nation. In Hayes's words, in the nation, law is venerated, but in the colony, fear and order undermine civil rights. Cleverly evoking the American Revolution mythos of unjust occupation, Colony in a Nation draws on Hayes's original reporting from Ferguson and West Baltimore to deliver an empathetic examination of how criminal justice has gone awry in the United States. Hayes is a white man, and it's a bit tricky to recommend his writing over that of black authors on the same topic. However, I think Hayes' learning process, which he dutifully lays out for readers, is a good faith example for other white people learning about criminal justice and policing for the first time. Additionally, the overarching metaphor of colonization taps into the nation-founding myths patriotic white people believe in. It is not a perfect book, and suffers by virtue of trying to use a relatively simple metaphor on a very complicated issue. But it's a good starting point to learn about issues including police as warriors, incarceration rates, policing for profit, racial profiling, and the ubiquitous firearm. If you have a hard time reconciling your friendly neighborhood police officer with systemic police brutality, Colony in a Nation provides a framework for understanding. Two things can be true at once, and this book helps you hold open space for both of them in your critical thinking process. Those are my recommendations today. Thank you so much for watching. As a last note, perceptive viewers will have noticed that none of the authors recommended today are Black Americans. Shouldn't they be the authority on anti-Black racism in America? Well, when it comes to anti-racism, I do believe in the responsibility of white people to educate ourselves. Teaching white people about racism is hard emotional labor for Black people, on top of the injustices of inequality. Black people have known about racism for generations, and have been sounding the alarm about its effects for just as long, but to mostly deaf white ears. If you, as a white person, want to learn about racism now, it is your responsibility to seek out that information and use it. It is not the Black community's responsibility to do that for us. The books I recommend today all acknowledge this truth. It's time for white people to learn about racism, and it's up to us to ensure that happens. However, listening to and raising up Black voices is a critical part in disrupting racism. In the description, you'll find links to anti-racist reading lists that feature Black voices predominantly. Use these lists to learn more after using today's recommendations to get started. And I encourage you to go even further. Find the books that the authors of books you like cite in the footnotes. Find magazine articles, blogs, and tweets written by Black people. Engage in conversations with your community to put what you've been learning into practice. The Goffstown Public Library is here to help you every step of the way. Join the conversation in the comments because we can all learn from each other. As always, the books I talked about today are listed in the description, along with information about Goffstown Public Library's downloadable content. All you need is your library card to access these books today. Like and share this video if you got something out of it, and please subscribe. Here you'll find book talks for all ages, story times, how-tos, crafts, and more. I'll see you back here next Saturday for another episode of Book Talk with Michelle. In the meantime, you can find the Goffstown Public Library on social media, or you can visit us at goffstownlibrary.com. Again, I'm Michelle for the Goffstown Public Library, and I'll check you out later. Bye!